So, on the continent, it was clear that the church was losing ground to secular powers. In particular, the Pope lost his papal states out of the movements of Napoleon and subsequent movements into France, and also out of a revolution in Italy. So a movement grew within the Roman Catholic Church called Ultramontanism. This means beyond the mountains. It recognised the supreme authority of the Pope in Rome, in any church that was beyond the mountains, beyond the Alps. Up until then, pretty much the provinces and the dioceses had been pottering along. They nodded in Rome's direction, they were sort of connected, but now a group sought more clear authority for Rome. This group was in tension in France with the Gallican nationalists and in Germany with the Febronianists. These followed the Bishop of Trier, von Hontheim, who wrote under the pseudonym of Justinius Febronius. He argued that the keys of the kingdom of heaven were given to the whole church, not just to Peter and his successors. So for him, church councils were supreme, not the Pope. In response to French nationalism, we have ultramontanists such as de Maistre, who lived between 1754 and 1821, arguing that society needed a central authority for cohesion. He saw the Pope as a spiritual authority, the monarchy defended by divine right as the needed secular authority. You have to remember at this point, the French Revolution wasn't a one-off. It kept getting put back by other people trying to take on being the king. It took a long time for it really to embed itself. Pius IX. If you go to Rome, it will be impossible for you to miss Pope Pius IX. If you go into Santa Maria Maggiore, below the altar is a relic of the manger. And in front of it, I would say dominating it, is a massive statue of Pius IX kneeling. St Paul outside the walls was rebuilt by Pius IX, and it contains plaques commemorating his declaration of papal infallibility and his declaration of the Immaculate Conception. In fact, if you go to Rome, Pius IX spotting can be a bit of a sport. Pius IX was long-lived. In fact, he was the longest reigning of the popes, and insecure. The Italian Republicans were nibbling away at the papal states, and he only held them for as long as he did with French assistance. His response to the loss of secular power was to assert his spiritual power. He proclaimed the dogma of the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mary in 1854, which said that she was purified of original sin before her birth. It gave a basis to the long-standing veneration of Mary, and it exerted his power. He, as the Pope, on his own, could proclaim dogma. In the Syllabus of Errors in 1864, he lists heresies and threats to the Church, which include political liberalism, democratic ideas, rationalism, and anti-clericalism. He prohibits civil marriage and liberal Catholicism. He also condemns religious toleration and rejects Bible societies, for they put the Bible into people's hands without the teaching of the Church on it. And just before he lost the papal states, just before he finally lost the papal states, he summoned the First Vatican Council, which met between 1869 and 1870. And at this had papal infallibility declared. This means that when the Pope speaks ex cathedra on issues of faith and morals, he is right. At the council there were 276 Italian bishops, 265 from other countries. It had a built-in Ultramontane majority by having so many Italians who wanted their Pope to have authority over the church elsewhere. But a council had asserted the supremacy of the Pope, and so that trumped those who were looking to councils for supremacy. Pius IX reacted to change by enthroning tradition, and to a dissenting bishop once he responded, "Tradition. I am tradition." Now, in response to this, a group of churches called the Old Catholics separated from Rome. In 1861, Victor Emmanuel was proclaimed King of Italy, and by 1870 this included Rome. Now the Pope retained only the Vatican City, the Lateran, and the Castel Gandolfo. All the rest of the Papal States had gone. Do you remember I said earlier under the Oxford movement about Newman? And in the 19th century there was a revival of English Roman Catholicism which Newman called the Second Spring. He saw the time since the Reformation as a long winter, but now life was returning. Actually, what happened was not a straightforward return to medieval Catholicism, but a response to the Gothic revival, and that favoured Roman Catholicism. White, who I've already mentioned, argues there are three reasons for this. One is Roman Catholics were more sacramental in the way they worshipped, and this new climate with more romantic ideas favoured this. Sacramental symbols pointed at truth rather than words which claimed to be the truth. The second is that those who favoured the separation of church and state could look to the existing Roman Church as that separation. It was not involved in the nitty-gritty of political life. It could be the longed-for spiritual guide separated from politics. The third reason was the immigration of Irish Roman Catholics. In 1780 there were 54,000 English Roman Catholics, which was actually a decline from the previous generation. By 1840 there were 450,000, which was almost 3% of the population. By then there were 420,000 Irish born, the vast majority of whom were Catholics. The Roman Catholic Church changed during this time. The Mass became a more corporate act rather than just a backdrop to personal devotions. Gothic vestments were introduced. But English Roman Catholics became somewhat obsessed with the Church of England. Rome saw England as a vehicle for spreading Roman Catholicism to the world, and key to that was to be the reconversion of the Church of England. If you remember, England had this empire and was influencing all sorts of parts of the world with its strange Protestant Catholicism. If only it could be brought back into the Roman fold, then there would be one Christianity throughout the world, neatly forgetting the Orthodox. But what Rome wanted wasn't a reunion of the existing Church of England with Rome, because she realised that wasn't going to happen. So what she worked for was individual conversions, which would leave the Church of England empty and replace it with the Roman Catholic Church. Actually, at their height, there were about 1,500 people moving across to the Roman Church. Their hopes never became fruition. But there was also a link in the minds of some intellectual Roman Catholics between Protestantism and capitalism. And so at the door of Protestantism could be all the ills laid of capitalism. The slums and the horrors of the factories would be resolved if only England would return to the true Roman Catholic religion. And so their effort didn't go on relieving the squalor, but the conversion of Anglicans. In 1850, Pius IX set up a hierarchy of bishoprics for England, and Nicholas Wiseman, who was the first Archbishop of Westminster and was made a cardinal, issued a pastoral letter which said, "We govern, and shall continue to govern the counties of Middlesex, Hereford, Hertford, and Essex. He probably meant the spiritual oversight of Roman Catholics there, but he didn't make this clear, and there was an uproar about this challenge to the state. Many Anglicans looked at the growing Roman Catholic Church with suspicion, and there were a number of novels dating back to M.G. Lewis's The Monk, which was the original horror novel published in 1796. So we get books such as Geralda the Demon Nun, and these were continued to be published up to the First World War. See, Catholicism was seen as un-English, priest-ridden, and ruled by a capricious, all-powerful pope. Now, I think we have to admit that part of the problem was racism. See, the Catholics were mainly Irish immigrants.